to Dipping and Out with Lucy, the podcast that opens up the discussion around domestic abuse. This morning, I'm sitting down with the wonderful Inge, who is the founder of the ITrust app. And as is my usual MO, I go straight to asking my guest a bit more about what they do and why they do it. So good morning, Nick.
Good morning, Lucy, and thank you for inviting me on. Very kind. And yeah, it's really nice to be here. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So ITrust app, can you explain a bit more about it and how it all came into being?
Yes, well, yeah, just to frame it, I used to be in the police until I retired nearly 5 years ago. Spent most of my service in informant handling, recruiting informants, criminal whistleblowers. Could see a gap in the market outside of the police for encouraging people to speak up about all sorts of different things, good and bad. And then we created some software with the ITrust app, which allows anyone within any organisation to, like I say, not just report the bad stuff, but the good stuff as well. So they can speak up, not whistleblow. That's the dirty word because that's all about classes and snitching. But speaking out, calling out the bad stuff, but also being able to praise a colleague, praise the organisation, suggest a change, report an near miss in particularly construction, create a survey, link it all to the speak up policies with any organisation. So it's effectively a one-stop shop feedback platform. There you go.
I love that. I love that because I think, you know, what you just said then about whistleblowing and in terms of speaking out, that's one thing that you find very much in kind of domestic abuse circle situations is it is that speaking out that's the hardest part, and it's knowing who to speak to. And, you know, very much in terms of the organisations you work with, again, you know, if you think statistically of those people who, if we talk about one in so many women, one in so many men, if they're in a work scenario, in the work situation, and is it something they could use then if they did, for example, feel in that situation at work that they needed to speak out about it, that's a platform that they could use?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when we built it, we wanted to make it easy to access. So it's accessed via a QR code. It's not a downloadable app from the App Store. So their organisation would come to us. We would set up their account. They would access it via a link on their intranet or via a QR code on posters around the building, for example. And then through a series of simple pages, they can send a report anonymously if they wish to, or they can be known from their mobile phone or through their intranet, and it goes straight to wherever the client wants it to go to. So, for example, in terms of the work that you certainly do and the brilliant work that you do, Lucy, it could be someone who's the victim, it could be someone who's a witness, or anyone who's associated to that issue. So they can send a report, like I say, because going back to what we talked about and the W word, the whistleblowing element to it, people don't like to be grasses or snitches, but they want to do the right thing. So if they haven't got a concern about a colleague or they have got a concern about themselves and they want to report it because it might be affecting their performance at work or stuff outside of work, then they can do it. So yeah, simple to access, simple to use, and very timely because when they press submit report through the system, it goes straight into the inbox of the client, like I said. So I suppose that's why we're making the traction that we are as a business.
I was going to say, yeah, and looking at it, you're doing phenomenally well. You need to give me some tips. And that's, you know what, you've hit the nail on the head there. It's knowing where to speak out to, and it's knowing sometimes that you can speak out, because a lot of the time I think people don't know where to go. And you know, I've talked to people in the past, and when you're in, say, for example, work, and you're in your workplace, that for somebody who's a victim or survivor of domestic abuse, that could be their safest place, you know, and so they stay maybe longer hours, or they, you know, they start a lot earlier, leave a lot later, because that's their safe space. And I think, you know, slowly things are starting to change in the workplace in terms of people talking out and speaking about abuse, because it has always been that kind of dirty phrase that, you know, when you say about whistleblowing, it's like, if I say to somebody, you know, this is what I do for a living, they kind of go, oh, right. And then kind of go, it's nothing to do with me. It doesn't affect me. And I think that's, for me, is where things need to change, is it affects everybody, you know, and proving that we can do an episode like this shows that it does affect everybody, because it's all interlinked. It's all interlinked in how we can speak out, how we can realize that actually there is support, because so often for victims of and survivors of domestic abuse, it's that trust element. And that's why I love. So how did the name come up? I know it's probably quite obvious, but I love that, because that's a big element of if you've experienced abuse, is that trust element afterwards.
Yeah, well, trust everything in life, isn't it? Between any relationship, even trusting yourself to do the
Yeah.
right thing. Right? So we were on holiday in 2017, I think it was, as a family, and I was walking along the beach back to where we were staying. I was thinking, what can I call this business? I was still in the police at the time. What can I call this business? And trust is everything. And in my old world of recruiting informants, and it's not the easiest job. There's lots of more
No.
difficult jobs, put it that way. But how do you get someone to grass the mates up, right? But and I used to say to my teams, I said, look, you're selling your trust in that person, right? You could be on the best informant handling course with the police or the security services or wherever it might be. If that person doesn't believe you, then it's a non-starter, and no
Yeah.
different from the world that we're talking about now. Is if someone's the victim of domestic abuse, for example, they need to trust that the system that they're going to use to report it is infallible in terms of it's not going to get hacked, or they got to first of all they got to believe it's there and what they're going to be doing is the right thing, right, whether that's the victim or the witness. And they also got to trust that the fact that where the report goes to is going to be acted on, because there's no point just sending a report and no one does anything about it and it goes into a big black hole. So trust is everything.
Yeah.
And I trust is, you can't get more personal than trusting it yourself, can you, in terms of the system? So that's why I called it I trust. Yeah, and I suppose it's easy in hindsight looking back, but it probably wasn't a bad title to call the business, because
Brilliant.
there's lots of there's not lots of other there's no one doing what we're doing anywhere in the world, but certainly in this world of speaking up, sometimes the names of the businesses are very one dimensional. But
Yeah.
it gets people thinking, and our strap line is hashtag more than tech. We're a software platform, I get it, but we're far more than that. The tech is far more than what it actually does, what it means and represents. And some of our clients use the fact that they've got our software in their business as a marketing tool, because it shows that they're open and honest and transparent. They want to empower their staff. They use it, the QR code in particular, as on their email signature blocks, because what it
Right.
shows is to their supply chain. And some of our clients have got some, yeah, massive, well-known clients, that are headline. You see them, you go shopping in some of them, I'm sure, but it shows them what they represent, and it not only shows their clients what they represent, but it shows their staff that they want to hear it every which way. It also shows people who are potentially coming to work for their business that this is what they represent. So it's hashtag more than tech.
Yeah.
It's not just a platform, it's more than that.
Like I say, it's very multifaceted in the best possible way, because that again in itself, and linking it back in with domestic abuse, it's that transparency, isn't it? It's that making it open to everybody to have that conversation, and on both sides. It's in terms of workplace, for example, if somebody was in that situation, it's for the workplace to know how can they help, how can they support, and for that individual to feel safe enough and trusted enough that something will be done. And I think that's a very big part of what's always been an issue over the years, is that victims and survivors struggle to think that actually it will progress and something will be done. It's not easy to make that decision in the first place to speak out, and when you do, you want to know that that process is going to be followed, and that you're not left kind of spinning in the wind, not knowing where that information is held. And it is like you say, it's sensitive, it's things that people may never have spoken about before. And knowing that there is that kind of approach to it, where people will say, okay, yeah, I know that something will be done, and at least you've made that first step, and that to me is amazing. And I love the idea of the QR code. You need to explain that to me as well, because I'd love to do that with I always think it'd be a really good idea, because again, it's simple. And in terms of thinking of victims of domestic abuse, even if you just scan it, you don't necessarily want to be able to pull a little tag off a poster. That's obvious if you're walking along with the perpetrator. And you don't want to make it obvious you're looking for that support. So the QR code's a brilliant idea.
Well, I say it's a brilliant idea. It's not my idea. It's come along because someone suggested it. But talking about the domestic abuse arena, we've got the posters up in a restaurant in Canterbury in Kent, where, and you obviously know about the Ask Angela initiative. But
Yeah,
what we've got now is the posters on the back of toilet doors, um, in the restaurant, where if someone is getting unwanted attention, for example, or they do want to report stuff, they can go on their QR code on the back of the toilet door and
yeah,
send the report straight into the restaurant. So there's more than one way to skin a cat here. And when you mentioned earlier, Lucy, about once someone's made that decision, to speak up, right? That's the hardest part because they got to step over that line. And once they've done that, if then what happens is nothing, then they then go and tell their friends and family at some point, well, I did report it, but nothing happened.
Yeah.
And it's ultimately sometimes, it doesn't end up in a really good place at all. So what happens is if the organization doesn't do anything about it, that they do report it, that is just as bad as not doing a bad job as well, because it just keeps
Yeah.
going and going and going. And where does it stop? And but stepping over that line is a massive, massive thing for people because they go, do you know what? We've got something called what we call the moral mile, and
Oh,
it's like a line that goes from sort of left to right, if you can imagine it, and you decide where to then make that point where you then report something. And I'm
right.
not obviously from your world at all, but there's going to be an element of research. I'm sure there's been masses done about where does the victim of domestic abuse decide that they're going to report something to either their friends, then an outside agency like the police or whatever it might be. But it wouldn't be the first. It wouldn't be on the first occasion. I'm pretty sure
No.
it'd be way down the line. But when they decide, that's where on that moral mile they decide that they're going to do it, and that's not just for domestic abuse. That's lots of different things, right? When you get to that point, it's like a breaking point sometimes. Right, okay, now I'm going to make a report. How do I do it? Where's it going to go? What's going to be the outcome? And if all those things then don't fall into place, then the person that's made that report goes, do you know what? I'll either put up with it, or I don't know. You can how it goes. So it's a massive. It's not just the fact. Like I say, this is not just the tech. This is part of a whole process
Process.
of
Yeah.
education from both parts in terms of victims and um, the the organisation that then looks after that victim.
I think that's brilliant because, again, you've just described precisely how the situation kind of for many, many people is. And obviously, I'll always say every situation is unique, but there are very similar threads that will run through. That's why people can say, I recognize that as abuse or I recognize that. But having that, like you say, that moral mile where, it isn't the first instance where somebody will say, and again, something else I will say is you don't go into a relationship or a situation with thinking, this is going to turn out to be abusive. That's not how it works. It's very slow, it's very insidious over time. And that's why it's very difficult for individuals to speak out because they don't recognize it as abuse. That's become their normal. But if it does get to that point where they start thinking, actually getting that gut instinct, that niggling feeling that things aren't right, having all these different channels where you can report something is so important because it's going to be at different points on that moral mile for different people. And that's what's so, to me, brilliant about the idea is, it's not saying you have to do it here or you have to do it there. And it's giving back that control and power that they've lost and saying, you can do it. And it's at a time that will suit you kind of thing and giving that control. And also leaving the people and not just perpetrators of abuse, but anybody who is behaving badly, if you like, it's leaving them nowhere to hide. And that's where we need to be at now, isn't it? Not allowing people to continue to behave in those ways.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of points there. So I was washing the car yesterday afternoon, just like I do on a Sunday, not every
Can
Sunday.
you come and do mine? Bit of a drive.
No one chooses to be, like you said, the victim of domestic abuse, right? No one chooses to be a whistleblower. You don't go as a career option at school. You go, oh, what do you want to be?
Yeah.
Oh, driver. Oh, I want to be a whistleblower.
Yeah.
But it's true, honestly. And also as well on that moral mile, it not just in domestic abuse. If you've been the victim and you come out the other side, you're more likely to report stuff if you come across it again
Yeah.
than you if you witness it, particularly because it's more pertinent to you.
Yeah.
Right. So, say for example, you've got a disability, or a member of your family has, or a friend, and you see someone parking in a disabled bay, which they shouldn't be, right? And that's quite a common occurrence.
Right.
You're more
Yeah.
likely to report that if you don't give a flying monkeys about it because it doesn't resonate with you personally. So that moral mile is very fluid in terms of who it is, what the offence is, how old they are, and what their experience has. There's lots of different permutations that go into it. I mean, it's probably the list is endless, but you get to that point of thinking, and a lot of it is it's not scientific. It's a gut feeling. You go, do you know what? I've had enough of this now. I'm going to report this, and that depends on, like I just said, all those different permutations.
That's amazing. And again, you're right. It is how many different areas it can cover. And that's obviously why it's so successful, is because it's so unique in that sense. And yet it's unique as an app, but it's also as the QR code. But it's not just the uniqueness of that, it's how relative it is to everybody. So you've got both sides of the coin, which I love that. There's nobody that you're missing out. You're encompassing everybody.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not clever, Lucy, believe you, but this has evolved by speaking to people and me not having a business background, certainly more experienced than I was certainly nearly 5 years ago. But saying, well, what do you want, as a client? What do you want as an organisation? All right, we want a whistleblowing function in old money, right? But we also want to be able to report near misses. We also want to hear the suggestions from the shop floor because they're the best ideas a lot of the time. So
Yeah.
we created this sort of multifaceted feedback platform, and certainly for people who are involved with domestic abuse as a victim, particularly, we want them to know where to go. We don't want them to go, do you know what? I'm in an organisation, or where do I suddenly find that? Because they're used to using the software because they've used it to suggest a change 365 days, 24/7, on holiday, on a beach. They've gone to a restaurant. They've gone, oh, do you know, that's a good idea. Or, because they're working or they've come across a competitor. Oh, that's a good idea. So it's not that. Where's that hotline number?
Yeah.
Oh, or if you're the victim of domestic abuse and whatever it might be, email inquiries at HR. Well, oh, come on. I mean, that is a tick box exercise, I'm afraid, in my humble opinion. But with
Oh, yeah.
this, you go, do you know what? I've got the app on my phone. I've shortcutted it. I can use it for. I mean, if I was in the old bill still, 24/7, 365, I could be suggesting changes. Even sometimes you're sitting on the train or on the beach or on wherever it might
Yeah.
be, or watching the telly, and you go, oh, do you know what? I can do it, or wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh, that's what I want to do, rather than this has come from a client of ours. We're in the third year of the contract with them. They had a bit of paper and a pen in the suggestion box in their reception area. And I said to them when we were designing the software, I said, what's that? And they went, that's a suggestion box. I went, oh, come on, this is the 21st century. I said, how many reports have you had in the last year? They went, zero. I
Yeah.
went, well, what you? I said, so why have you got it? And they went, that's because we're trying to show the, our, our supply chain when they audit us that we've got this mechanism of people suggesting. So it's not about, for them at the time, it's changed now, but it
Yeah.
was more about what this represents in the same way that's been extrapolated into the app itself. This is what it represents. It's more than just, like I say, a QR code
It's
that
in the
we.
tick box. Yeah, exactly. And that's what organizations should be signing up to, because at the end of the day, the one reason I started out doing what I was doing, and I've just listened back to an episode I've recorded with somebody else, and I was, to me, we're all human beings at the end of the day, and we all have that right to be happy. We have the right to an enjoyable life. Nobody has more right than another person to have all those things. So we all have that right to be able to enjoy a day at the football or be able to park in a bay for people with disabilities. We all have those rights and you're right, it isn't about whistleblowing. It's about doing the right thing and speaking up. And I think, for many, many years, I've always been told I'm very down to earth and I'm very matter of fact about what I say. I don't know if that's being northern, I don't know. But I try not to sugarcoat things too much, because for me, it is, we have to be realistic. And sometimes I get a bit of grief when people say you're being, when I'll say it is hard, if you're fortunate enough to leave a domestically abusive relationship, it isn't going to be easy. Very often there is post-separation abuse. Very often you will find perpetrators cause all manner of problems for the victim survivor when they're at work. There's all of these things that go on. And I'll be realistic about it and say it isn't going to be plain sailing. So we're better off being truthful, saying, look, there are these things here to support you. You don't have to suffer on your own. You don't have to sit back and think, well, this is the way it is. I've got to accept it. And I think what I also love about it being called ITrust is, again, it's so universal and it's so generic. So if somebody were to report something, it isn't going to scream, I'm in a domestic abusive situation and I'm reporting this. It keeps that anonymity, like you say. I love that. That's such a good idea.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
I think, yeah, and also as well, like I say to clients and potential clients, if you've got a decent feedback, call it a feedback system because that's what it is, right? A feedback system, it acts as an insurance policy because people are less likely to do something wrong because they
Yeah.
know, for want of a better phrase, they're going to get grassed up as well. So, do you know what? I won't do it. And look, it's not a catch-all complete panacea for everything that's ever going to go wrong in the world because I get that, but it's another level of insurance to go. Do you know what? It's not that. Oh, hello. Is that you, Lucy, anonymous? Or well, get it honestly. Last week I had a conversation with someone who it was honestly, but it's the case of they didn't trust the system, and 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 if they did use it, then and I won't mention who it was at all, but it was play hunt the source instead of listening to the information that came through. It was who's the who can we
Right.
guess? It was not a game. This is what I had in my old world. Sometimes we used to put information about, say, for example, I don't know, someone's doing some burglaries somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Instead of going, right, let's research who the burglar is and let's find out who they do it. It was like, who can we guess who's the source of information? Who about that? Just worry about what the information is. You know, somebody was like Cluedo. It's just not
We're looking at
clueless.
the wrong element here.
Yeah, clueless. I think probably more apt, but not Cluedo. It's just mad. But anyway, it is what it is. But yeah, and like I say, we're not doing too bad in terms of this is not all about ITrust, by the way. This is about speaking up. But in terms of culture in
Yeah.
any organisation, certainly post COVID, I think people, and you see it a lot on the news now. Certainly, when I will call it out, like the post office
Yeah.
and other large organisations, particularly where they're they've admitted they didn't get it right in terms of the culture, or they were more interested in protecting the organisation rather than looking at the victims. And people are getting, I think, far more um, empowered to call stuff out because they know that you know it's not everything that it seems to be with it. Certainly these big brands and big corporates. And going back to my old world again, without boring you stupid, but I used to say, there is no big secret about this in terms of what we do. We're taking information from people, writing it down and passing it on. That's all it is, whether it's from shoplifting through to the counter-terrorism world. That's all it is. And if you think it's something sexy, that you can polish it like a James Bond thing. It's very basic stuff. It's someone telling you what's going on, and the best information comes from other humans. You can do
Yeah.
all the sort of technical stuff in the world. You can do, I get it, but you don't get what their emotion is and what potentially someone's going to do, right? So that's you can't beat human sources,
No.
and it's the best form of intelligence. So why wouldn't a business or any organisation take up on it? It's
Absolutely. And that's interesting when you were just saying then, because about how I was just thinking in terms of with very much with individuals who've experienced abuse, what society finds hard to understand is people will react differently to different situations, and very similar in terms like what might bother one person enough to report it through ITrust might not bother. Like you say, it's all relative to, does that affect you? Does it have that impact on you? But if we start to see things in a clearer light where other people will start to see actually maybe that is important to report that, because of we all try and stay in our own lane so much, but to the point where again, like I'll say, a lot of people say, well, I don't talk about abuse, it's not my problem, it doesn't affect me. Whereas if I sort of say, well, okay, so your friend, your work colleague, your neighbor, a member of your family, somewhere along the line you will know someone who's been impacted by abuse, someone who's experienced abuse. You could be experiencing it yourself and you don't even know it. And then you
mm,
find people kind of go, oh yeah, I never thought of it like that. So we've got to change that mindset, haven't we, in terms of everything is our responsibility, if you like. If somebody is doing something wrong, it's our responsibility to speak out and to say something. And again, it's got me thinking, because I often talk about family and friends who don't know how to support somebody. So if they're seeing their loved one being abused, or their friend, or whatever it is, and I don't just mean physical abuse. I'm not, people hear the word abuse and they assume I mean, physical violence. It can be that person has changed before your eyes as the person they used to be. They might have been
mm,
bubbly, fun-loving, happy, going out all the time and enjoying the life, socializing, and then all of a sudden, slowly over time, that's been eroded, and they now don't leave the house, or they're not allowed to go out for coffee, or all these different things. There's so many elements. But is it somewhere as well then, so if a family or friend or work, if they have those kind of concerns, they can report something?
well, they can if they have access to the software, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not some sort of generic sort of software for the universe where
No.
everyone goes in and it goes into some, I don't know,
Forevermore.
yeah,
Yeah.
into the government to sort out, I don't know, this,
Yeah, well, you might do a better job.
well, who knows? But yeah, no, they have to be able to access it via their organisation.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're like that Ask Angela thing. We might be doing something along those sort of lines um, in the next few months. Who knows? But where it's not just a case of say, just obviously it's fantastic what they do, but in terms of right, okay, it's a multifaceted element of reporting, not just okay, I'm going to report it to the bar staff about can I call a taxi, for example. That's the code word, but this is there's an issue going on in this club every single Friday, Saturday night, or whatever it might. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's a report, and also as well, there's the evidence on the back of it. If someone is being particularly abusive or doing something they shouldn't be doing, someone can record it on their phone we'll take a photograph and that goes as evidence straight into the club to then go, do you know what, that person, we can pass that on to the police or whatever it might be, or
Yeah.
bar them from coming in again. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's more than just that one-dimensional hotline type element to
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it stops that escalation, doesn't it, as well? Like you say, if somebody trying to intervene themselves, like you say, if you're at a football match, something like that, rather than many years ago, somebody might call it out and then it causes an even bigger, you know.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've got it in quite a few clubs now, but one club in particular told us a few weeks ago that what they're getting report-wise back, not on the app, but from referees who they now want to come and referee at their club because they know there's a safety mechanism. They're less likely to get abused, which is a
Wow.
great way of using like I say, it's more than tech, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is a way of attract. I mean, referees, without the referees, there's no football match, right?
No.
So, and who wants to become a referee? I mean, I'll take my hat off to people who do it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a way of, allowing them to feel safer to go, and no different from domestic. It is abuse, right? It's abuse at work. They're going to work to referee a game. They're getting abused. Okay, well, look, I feel safer, and maybe this is where this conversation in terms of the domestic abuse arena is. I feel safer in this environment because I can then report stuff because I've
Yeah.
got the mechanism and the ability to do so. So
It is that mechanism, and it is that feeling safe. You shouldn't have to go if you're spending your Saturday refereeing a match. You shouldn't have to go in feeling like, oh my God, don't want to do this. This is, and it's supposed to, the idea is, the sad thing about all that is it's meant to be entertainment. I mean, I might be stepping over the line and saying it's entertainment because I'm sure a lot of people would say it's not entertainment. It's a religion. It's a way of
yeah,
life. I'm afraid for me it isn't. So again, this is where I'll just be honest and say I get it, and I do understand for a lot of people it is. But at the end of the day, this is something that people go to enjoy themselves, to have that experience, and it shouldn't be something that's then marred by some, bad behaviour again.
no, would you know what? I'm way behind the curve in terms of that sounds very American, doesn't it? In terms of behind the curve. But Ted Lasso. Have you seen Ted
I
Lasso?
haven't, but do you know what? It's one of those things. It's on the watch list of about 50 other things I wouldn't mind watching.
Yeah, well, I've just watched the first series, and it's a bit of a spoiler alert, but he's an American manager or person who comes in and manages a fictitious English team, right? And one of the scenes is he's got X thousand people shouting a very rude word at him from the stands because of what he is, right? And you're thinking that wouldn't happen in any other workplace.
Yeah,
It can't. It's impossible. But he's at work, and you've got all these people shouting abuse. This is now comedy, right? And
yeah,
because it's the standard, why should a referee go to work and then literally be accused of doing everything under the sun just because they've they've made a decision? They don't do it they do it for the right reasons, right? And then they get a lot of abuse. That's absolutely terrible. It's yeah. I mean, maybe I'll go back to the beginning in terms of you know my background and why I joined the police in the first place. I got frustrated with, society not doing things maybe, or people trying to get away with stuff when they're committing crime. That I'm not a social worker, I get it, but if you can, and each their own. But if I can try and prevent a further crime or catch the person that has committed a crime, and no different from what we've done now. We created ITrust, created some software, and if someone somewhere who will never know, even the organisation that gets a report, has has found the confidence to use the system
yeah.
to have the ability to then send a report about whatever it is, good and bad. That's what it's done it for. And that sounds really cheesy. And I'm not the new
No,
Messiah by any stretch of the imagination. I annoy myself, letting anyone else on this planet. And I'm not perfect by a long stretch, but but that's going back to my old world of right. Okay, I've nicked so and so for doing, or I've prevented that, or detected it. With this is, well, we created a system. Someone would never know anywhere in the world. They'll send a report because they've got the confidence to be got off the bottoms and created a software system where they've got the ability to send something to the anonymous if they want.
yeah.
That's what it's for us. So.
I do love that. And I think that's very true and very honest of you because, I think if any of us go into these kind of roles where you are trying to make a difference, you're doing it because you do want to make a difference. You're not doing it thinking, I know what I'll do today. I'll come up with something that's going to cost sleepless nights and, not knowing what the next year, next month's going to bring. You do it because, as you say, it's the right thing to do and you want to make changes and you want to make those positive changes. And through what you're doing, there will be many, many people who've been helped and supported, and many organisations, who have found that things need to improve, and they'll have had that help and support. And I think that to me is so massively important that we make those massive changes that have been
Yeah,
needed.
Yeah, like I say to people, look, we're not making widgets for widgets' sake here. I'm not wasting. My wife's an A&E nurse, right? Life is very short, like we all know, right? And she sees it through, a
Yeah,
very different set of eyes. But I'm not wasting our clients' time because I don't want to. What's the point? I'm wasting
yeah,
their money. I'm ultimately wasting the user's time because if someone then does use it and nothing happens, then what's the point? I've always said when we set this business up, I don't want to work with clients that don't believe in what we're doing because it's an absolute waste of time. Life's very short, right? So,
yeah.
I'm not. You remember those singing fish? They used to put on
Oh
the
yeah,
mantelpiece. Yeah, well, look, good luck to the person who made millions of those and whatever. But my heart wouldn't be in selling singing fish.
yeah,
Maybe who knows? But you've got to be passionate about what you do, and passionate is very overused word. Empowerment is a very overused word. People use it for the wrong reasons sometimes. But you've got to demonstrate what you're doing relative to who you are as a person, you know, and ultimately this is about obviously allowing someone to speak up in the workplace for the good and bad, right? But it's the proof point. It's the proof point personally for me as a person going, created a business once I've finished on this planet and my time is up. It is a legacy, and like I
yeah,
say, I'm not the new messiah, but if we created something like you've done and you are changing people's lives in terms of training and empowerment, and of course, but basically, and there's a book called Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, which is the story of Nike, right?
oh yeah. Well, I've seen the film. Yes, I've seen,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's really good, isn't it? And there's a few little spin-offs from it. But he makes his money. He sold the business. He makes his money. He spends the money with his wife, and then he turns around to her and says, "I'm missing something." And he's missing this. He's missing the fact that he's created a business and he's created jobs and prosperity and nothing's perfect. Nike's not perfect. No organization is, but this is what this is about. This is the oh look, we've just opened another door, and that club's taking it, or this organization's taking it, and
yeah.
like I say about that report from referees now want to come and referee at that club because we
Right,
years ago decided to come up with a name on a beach on holiday. I
yeah.
still remember above my desk. You see, I've got a framed. We come off the beach. We're staying in some apartment, and I've got two children. And Louis, my son, was I think what was it? He was what's he now, 21. So yeah, 7, 8 years. When was it? 17. Yeah, 7 years ago. I said to Louis, I said, look, do you mind just draw me a logo? So he on these little bits of post-it notes. We had it. I kept them all, and it's now been framed. And obviously the logos have evolved, but it's the basics of what it is now. And it's the
Wow.
story, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
about eventually when I exit this business at some point. Who knows when that will be? But what it represents, and it's the buzz you get out of it, and helping people and doing this is great fun.
Absolutely. And I don't, you know what? I think that's a lovely way to explain it because I don't think there's any better feeling than knowing that you're doing something that is making that difference, that is, and again, the simplest ideas sometimes are walking along a beach or, when I started this, I didn't think I'd be doing a podcast. I thought it was going to be a website that was like a magazine style that would just be interesting information for people, resources around domestic abuse. And that's evolved, and now I'm doing guest speaking, I'm doing consultancy, and it's wonderful, and I love it, and I wouldn't do anything else. And I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm sure you're not saying it's easy, because when you come up with an idea and it is quite unique, you think, okay, this is either I'm going to have to go for it or not. So there's two choices. You either go, I'm going to do it, and then you find that actually you are making a difference. And I'm with you there. I would love to think in the future. My daughter always says, I'll take over for you. I'm thinking, okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
Sounds good to me. You can have all this and work on it, do what you need to do. Not a problem. But I think
absolutely.
that's what's so important is, and if I'm inspiring her to feel that this is something that's important to help other people, that really, I think essentially deep down, we are all looking for the good in everybody, aren't we? I often say that when one of the things I do talk about is, and again, it's not a popular opinion, is when people say, why does a child, talking of, say, your kids, but why does a child love the perpetrator parent? And my first response is because children are innocent and they love everybody, they want to see the good in everybody. And if we all got back to being that child where we want to see the good, now I'm not saying that the perpetrator has the right to perpetrate and to obviously abuse, they don't. But if you can then educate those children and say, okay, you can love somebody, that's absolutely fine, but you also don't have to respect that behavior. You don't have to put up with that behavior. You don't have to accept that behavior. Then we're making steps in the right direction for the next generation. And
Yeah.
it's a complicated one there, obviously, when it comes to parents and children. But I think essentially that message is we all want to see the good in everybody. And that's when it's difficult, when we see people do things that are maybe something we'd never consider doing in a million years. And then feeling like your hands are tied, that you can't do anything about it because, like you say, years ago, if you reported it, you were a whistleblower, or you were moaning, or you were, you were a pain, you were a problem. Whereas actually the problem is the person that's creating the issues in the first place.
Yeah, and it's not an easy subject. This is where you from ITrust, but that whole speaking up agenda and why people do and don't. You can criticize, you can't criticize, you can. But when I do presentations, certainly onboarding presentations, sometimes I say to the audience, I say, look, put your hand up. If you ever been a grass or a snitch, right? And very few people do, and those that bravely do, I said, look, thank you very much for bravely sticking your hand up. Would you like to share your story with us? And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Everyone looks in the room at them and go, oh my goodness, they're a grass. And I say, well, look, thank you for it. And I say, look, with all due respect, you're all probably lying, you
Yeah.
know, because you're
Yeah.
less likely to want to do anything. But you're just as culpable as the person that's doing thinking the wrong thing half the time because you're staying silent. And I know how hard it is. It's really difficult. And I spoke up when I was in the police against this. Oh, that's a whole different podcast. That is, yeah,
All
hang
right,
on
we'll
back.
get another episode in then.
Well, that'll be a whole day. That will, but
Yeah.
it's not easy with my team. And they looked at me as Nick Inge, as a supervisor, not as a person, not as a supervisor, because they look at you and they go, if I hadn't done anything about it,
Mm.
because I'm asking them to call out stuff if they see something. If I can't do it as a person, right, and it's not easy, that stepping over that line against the organisation that pays your bills, puts
Yeah.
food to somebody, puts a roof over your family's head, and all that sort of stuff, it's really hard. And you think you're going against the grain, and then you know what the repercussions are going to be, because not all the time, but a large amount of the time, you get gaslighted, you get told that you're the issue. Hold on a minute, this is not, this is because that's what happens, and
Yeah.
certainly it's very well documented in the press with lots of different organisations. Yeah, I will name it the NHS. There's well documented examples of where someone's called out stuff and it hasn't been acted upon, or what's happened is they've been then gaslighted and been told they're the
In that
problem.
narrative, so it's your fault, not
Yeah,
what you
yeah,
think.
yeah. It's very common, and people see that, and they're less likely to want to speak up about stuff, and it puts people off. They go, do you know what? I don't want to go that line. I'll stay quiet. It'll carry on, and then it just might die a death because someone else then speaks up, and it's not my problem. Hold on a
Yeah.
minute. If you knew what's going on, and you're the only one that knows what's going on, that victim's going to carry on being the victim. So you have to have the bottle to stand up and go, do you know what? I know what the process is going to be. I know what sometimes the outcome's going to be, but if I don't do it morally, how can I go to bed and sleep well when I know that someone's still getting abused? That's terrible as a
Yeah.
human, as a person. How could you go then to your grave and go, do you know what? I let someone carry on being abused because I couldn't be bothered to do anything about it because I was being too selfish and looking after my own skin. Come on.
Oh God, definitely. And if we all waited for someone else to make that decision to speak out, well, then the next person might think, well, if they're not doing it, I'm not doing it. If they're not doing it, I'm not doing it. And we're back in this kind of vicious cycle of everybody just burying their heads. And
Yeah.
I suppose in a way, in some ways, I appreciate now the world is very. I mean, I'm 45, but the world seems a very different place to me now than it was when I was little. Same for my parents; it's a very different place for them now. And but we do have it, we've got to look at the positives, that there are more ways to speak out now. Having all these years ago, you wouldn't have been able to speak out. And if you did, then like you say, there'd be repercussions for it. Um, but now we do have the opportunity, we have that chance. And all the idea is we're also scared of organizations, and the backlash. But actually, without the people working within those organizations, an organization wouldn't exist. So we have to remember that you have a voice, and again that links back in with domestic abuse, because it's something that's often said, giving a voice to the voiceless, and people who are scared to speak out. So times are changing, thankfully, and with things like ITrust. And how long's it been going for? I meant to ask that as well, sorry.
Well, we set up in 2017 as a dormant company, and then I retired in June 19, and here we are, April 24. So yeah,
Wow.
few years now. So yeah, but you think about speaking up in its broadest sense, and I used that term before. With social media and the internet, speaking out includes going on TripAdvisor, right? And
Yeah.
giving it that's speaking out, going on Glassdoor and reviewing your organization, going out on, that's speaking out, isn't it? But
Yeah.
if you can hone it into something that is more tangible in terms of a particular organisation. I suppose that's why we found the niche that we have, I suppose. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was exciting, and we're doing all right. We got it in, from SMEs through to charities, through to education, through to a government organisation, through to we used it in Pakistan a few months ago for a large food retailer who surveyed some of their factories out there, and we translated it into Urdu and Sindhi and Pashtun. So we've gone from a offering hotlines from grassroots football clubs that my son used to play for, and I stood on the touchline listening to nonsense for donkey's years. To then we've gone through and scaling. It's exciting, yeah.
It's
It's exciting.
amazing. It's amazing what you've done, and you're giving me hope, and you will be giving a lot of people hope that if you do have an idea, that's the thing, isn't it? Just go for it, try. Because if you don't try, you'll never know. And I think you're right. The word passionate about things, it does get overused, but I think it's hard to think of another word to describe when you're doing something that you know is all you want to do. You want to put your head on the pillow at night, like you say, knowing you've done the right thing, knowing that you've tried your best. Then yeah, do it. Do the things that make you happy, and do things to do good. Why would you not want to do the right thing? I
Yeah,
think.
you said passionate. I have got two words instead of passionate. I call
Oh,
it blind oblivion.
like,
Right. I said, well, I said, how do you keep going with this? I said, I like because there's plenty of times like you could have done, pull the plug on it. Right, it's so easy,
yeah,
but all that sort of stuff. But I just keep because you know where you want to go. If it's going to be a blog, it's going to be a website, it's going to be a podcast. It just evolves organically. And that sounds like a
yeah,
cheesy phrase, but you keep going, and eventually you find something that works, or people get, and they get you because you're really lovely and passionate about what you do, and it
oh,
comes across in bucket loads, and hopefully that I've got a bit of that as well. But that's what makes it work eventually. And you're thinking you hone it, hone it, hone it, hone it, and go right. That's what it is, and you find your niche, whether it's in this world
yeah,
or your world or whatever. But
yeah,
you want to do it, and that you can't buy that. That's got to come from your heart. And I'm nowhere near the finished article in terms of the business, certainly not. But
yeah.
we're going in the right way at the minute, on a good trajectory. So that's the same as you.
And doing things like exactly, and thank you for that. That's lovely. And to be able to do things that are important to you. And I have to admit, I don't think many years ago when I was at university, I thought in my 40s I'd be creating something that's basically talking about domestic abuse all day long and all evening, and and it is, but you do find your niche, don't you? And I think then it's something that you can't, once you find it, you can't let it go. You've got to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing I'll say is this: is in terms of the work that you do with victims, in particular, if they listen to this and see what you've done way before this podcast, they then believe in what you're doing, and they know that there's true support out there, not just paper exercise and a faceless website.
Yeah.
There's a person behind it that really knows what they're doing and believes in what they're doing, and it gives them that encouragement to do something about it. And that's you can't buy that.
Oh, I love that. And I think you've just summed it all up perfectly.
Well,
Thank
I hope
you.
so. I don't know about that, but I've said something. So, and we've talked for 45 minutes, so we must have
I
filled
was
the
going to say we
airways
could talk for
somehow.
another. We could talk for another 45. Not sure we carry on about this. We'd probably go off at a tangent and talk about
Yeah,
something else.
well, well,
Oh, Nick, thank you so, so much. Thank you. And yes, what I was going to suggest as well is it's up to you. I'm quite happy to put the link, any links that you want putting on the resources page. Because again, a year ago, my resources page started off with about 3 little links, and now there's it's getting into quite a few links there. It's a very long scroll to get through, but that's the point, is there's so many resources out there. So if you're happy, anything like that, people know then where to go as well. Get more resources out there, the better.
that's very kind. I'll send you the link through to our e-brochure, and then that's very kind. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Oh, thank you, Nick. Thanks for this morning.
Thank you, Lucy, for inviting me on. Honestly, really enjoyed it, and yeah, you're doing some brilliant stuff. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Where